Okay, hey everyone, welcome to the Where Data Meets Business webinar. I'm Sonia Ketkar, a former academic and researcher, current consultant, and the host of this online event. Today's topic is how to develop and execute consumer insights roadmaps in a very tactical and actionable way. To help us navigate the world of consumer insights, I have invited Marc Normand as our speaker. Marc is a leading marketing research and insights consultant. As the founder of his company, Insight Driven Solutions, he combines advanced analytics with innovative research methodologies and data storytelling to inform marketing strategy for clients across media and entertainment, tech, telecom, pharma, and healthcare. With an MS in international marketing and over 20 years of experience, he has developed and executed many insights roadmaps for global media companies, including Disney, where we met, and NBC Universal. Marc, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
So I want to jump in and start tapping into your expertise. But first, for everyone who is joining us live, feel free to put any questions you have for Marc in the chat box. We will get to them as soon as we can or during the dedicated Q&A time at the end of this session. We'll also be hosting many more webinars, so you can sign up to our newsletter, databusiness.substack.com, or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Where Data Meets Business to stay connected. So let's get started. I like to begin every session by just getting folks on the same page in terms of definitions and concepts that we're going to discuss. So, Marc, what is a consumer insights roadmap?
Great. So I view a roadmap as an insights roadmap is just like a regular map. It's a tool for helping you to get to where you want to be. And it starts with orienting yourself to where you are, and then absolutely having a definition of where you want to get to. And then the roadmap is everything in between. It's actually mapping out all the stops along the way that makes sure that you arrive at your destination happy, safe, secure, and hopefully having accomplished all the things that you had set out to do as part of your journey.
Awesome. And then why do you need it? Like, why does one have to have a roadmap, or why should one have a roadmap?
So that's a great question, and it's very simple. If you don't know where you're going, then how do you know if you've gotten there? My father used to use a quote. He said, "If you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there." But unfortunately, in the world of business, you don't really have any road or any option to take. So having a roadmap, having a strategy, in essence, is what it is, allows you to know if what you're doing is going to allow you to arrive at your destination, or if you're just going off on a tangent, off into the woods.
Yeah, I love that story that you just told about your dad giving you that wisdom. That's awesome. So, okay, so we know what a roadmap is now. We know what its function is. Now, how do you get started? So say you're going to build a roadmap, you have a particular goal in mind. How do you get started, and what are its components, so to speak?
Sure. So we're diving right in. This is great.
We are.
Yeah. So the components of a roadmap is, first you have to know where you are. And so in any map, every time you walk into a mall, even though those things are dying out, there's a store you're trying to get to, you have to find the map that says that you are here. So you are here as the starting point. And so where exactly are you? Where is your organization? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to learn or accomplish? And I do have a slide on this, which is my second slide, which kind of maps this out. But you have to know where you are first, and then you have to know also where you're going. And so just the key thing to keep in mind with insights is that an insight can come from primary data, it can come from first-party data, it can come from competitive intelligence, industry presentations, or outlooks. It can come from literally anywhere that allows you to serve your organization with the needs that they need to make decisions. And it's pretty broad, but it's also important to know that your insights roadmap is about defining, number one, what are the tools, information that everyone in your organization is using? What is their current satisfaction with your team's output or input into the overall process? What is your individual satisfaction with how your team is situated within the organization? Are they at the table with decision makers? Are they kept behind the scenes because they're order takers? There's a whole bunch of different variables, but I would say that everything goes into the roadmap. Everything should be part of your roadmap. Do you have the current technology that you need to do your job? Is there a certain amount of innovation that you're trying to develop, that you're trying to get to, that the industry is focused on, but that's just not present because the culture in your organization isn't there? So you can take feedback polls on individual stakeholders. You can take feedback from individual team members. And it's just important to start at some point. As hard as it is, if you've never created one, then you just have to start somewhere. And it's about documenting more or less where you are in every point along the way so that you know what you're working with as a benchmark.
Got it. So it seems like the first step, as you just pointed out, is having those conversations with all the different stakeholders to kind of start building out your to your map, building out your map. Sorry. So are there any particular stakeholders that that you talked about, the different groups? You talked about the technology groups, and you talked about the folks who are taking notes and so on. Like, are there any particular who are the most important stakeholders here? Is it your are they your customers? Are they or the users, depending on what the goal of your roadmap is? So yeah, who is
Sure.
it?
Yeah. So, and it's an interesting question. If depending on what size of the organization that you work in, I would say you would start with your direct report. Who's the person that's going to fill out your end of year review? Who's going to in particular, the person who controls whether you are doing a good job or not, and that will report back and has to write your review. That is the first person you have to serve. Then it becomes a matter of all the individual clients that you serve within the organization. From coming from large corporate life, you could have many dotted lines that you report to. They don't have to be your boss per se. They're not the ones filling out your performance review, but they all contribute towards your overall performance evaluation and their satisfaction. It's whether you're serving their needs or not. So I would say I would take every individual person that you have to serve directly, or someone that you report to. That is your starting point. If you're new to an organization, then it's great to have some of this feedback right off the bat. You get a little bit of a leeway to try to learn what some of these things are. And if you've been within the organization for a long time, sometimes you might already have a sense of that. But again, if you can document in either it could be an informal survey, it could be done through email, you could do survey tools or things like that, but just you have to capture that feedback so that you know exactly what are the important needs of your stakeholders. What are they trying to do? Where they're trying to get? Are there any events that they're trying to plan for? Are there any problems that they've had with the team or getting information that's been useful to them? Collecting all that feedback is going to be incredibly helpful to start things off.
Got it. Thank you. So my next question was going to be, are there any best practices in developing the roadmap? And you definitely mentioned one of them already right now. Are there any others that you think are really important?
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of best practices. I would say number one, you have to start the process somewhere. So if you haven't done this before, and I can actually say from my own personal experience, when I started at my last job, large corporate company, which I will not mention right now, I didn't have a plan. I did not have a roadmap per se that was defined, and it took me a year and a half to actually implement. But once I started that process, it was a game changer, because, well, I'll get back to that in a second. But then, so start the process. You have, as a best practice, you have to start somewhere. But as soon as you start documenting what it is, where you are in that organization, and once you have a definitive plan of where you're trying to get to, then that starts to make your plans a lot more clear. Things will come into focus. And having a destination at the end of the year. So the end of the year is also, I mentioned performance reviews. Think about your performance review. 12 months from now, what kind of conversation do you want to have with the person that you're reporting to? Or what kind of conversation do you want to have with your individual stakeholders about all the work that you did? Can you tie it together in a way that makes sense? Is it transparent? Have you communicated your plans or your intentions along the way? Do they have a clear sense of what your priorities are? Are your priorities in line with the business? Are you an actual business partner, or where you're actually working to solve their needs, anticipate their needs, or are you more or less just answering questions or taking orders from people and not contributing a lot of thoughtfulness or insightfulness into the type of work or questions that they're trying to answer, or the actual people that they're trying to serve as initially.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That sounds good. So, kind of switching gears a little bit to talking about, we talked about developing these roadmaps to talk about like execution of the roadmap. So, how do you go about executing it? I know you're going to have to make some assumptions here because we don't have a roadmap in front of us right now, but just based on your experience.
So executing the roadmap is there's a key ingredient here, which is the calendar, right? So you have to map all of your initiatives to a calendar. That's what makes it timely. We can talk about specific goals, or goals being SMART, right? The T in SMART goals is timely. Everything lives on the calendar. Your performance review, it's scheduled, it's coming up, it's out there. But just backing up into that, are there any major events or meetings that your team or whoever your clients are, internal or external, that you're serving, what are they working towards? You have to map all of your insights back to that. Another key thing to consider is that, look, based on the volume of data that's coming out, and the amount of information that's coming out, and how quick, thanks to AI, thanks to automation, how quick it is to get insights, I would say that your timeline, your ability to use research that is not from this year is already limited. So, it's 2025. I would say that you should have hit the ground running with your insights plans by January 1st, right? And that's a day off for most people, but obviously by January 3rd, you should start to have your plans should have been written, and you should have gotten buy-in from your stakeholders almost towards the end of the year, so that you can hit the ground running, so that if you have anything that takes a long time to do, or if you have primary research that you need to go in the field with, you can date stamp that as 2025, because I guarantee the second it turns 2026, it's already old. And it doesn't matter if you did it in December and it says December 2025. If you start in January of 2026 and your data is dated 2025, it's already going to look old. So it's really important to act quickly, but to have a plan in place.
To have very recent data is also what I sort of gleaned from what you mentioned. Yeah, that's absolutely true, and I'm glad that you brought up the whole AI on and automation bit, because in some ways, I guess it's going to make us more efficient and faster at getting things out the door. But at the same time, you also have to put more thought and effort into actually building that into your roadmap as well, I guess. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mentioned, so there's insights. Again, insights can come from any data source that you're working with, but there's also the process of getting those insights. And so the process can be improved as well. AI is making things incredibly efficient. And if you haven't dabbled in it yet, you absolutely have to. And you should honestly spend a little bit of time every day trying to just experiment with different ways you can do it. Because AI is used obviously there's the summation part of things, right? Just being able to get to insights quicker. Summarize this 14-page article into 5 different bullets. There's a whole bunch of different prompts that you can use to just make the summation and the analysis part a lot quicker and more efficient. But there's also the creation side, right? The generative side, which is about create a presentation from the notes that I've taken, or here's an outline. How would you map this into a presentation? And then there's the data visualization component of that. So if you're not good in Excel, if you've never dabbled in SQL or Python, you don't actually have to do that. There's a number of AI tools out there that will do that work for you, and they'll actually show you what the code looks like. And very often when you start to dabble in these tools, it'll give you insights into how you can analyze the data yourself, or actually the way that you can speak to it, so that you sound more intelligent about the analysis that went into it.
Got it. You also briefly touched upon the different sources that you could get insights from, and you talked about, I think, primary research and a couple of the other sources. In your experience, was there any particular one where you felt like it had, it was providing a certain type of information that was more, again, going back to the data piece of it, right? That was more invaluable, or not invaluable per se, maybe that's the wrong word for it, but more sort of recent, more authentic, more genuine than other sources, which you probably couldn't
Yeah.
rely on quite as much.
I would say one of the greatest sources, if you're looking for industry intelligence, if you're looking for competitor or competitive intelligence, is looking at investor relations reports. Every company that's public has to file an annual report, and within that report, they will mention something about the consumer and what types of trends that they're facing, whether that's positive or negative for their business. But that's incredibly helpful and insightful. They will produce 10K reports. Obviously gets deep into the business, and there's their financials that are a component of that, but there's a lot of insights that they will talk about the marketplace, about potential impact or negative impact to their revenue streams based on competitive developments, based on technology developments, and also based on consumer changes, preferences, or even international competition. So I would say that that is one of the greatest free sources of deeper level intelligence that you can get about your industry or different products that you work in or the marketplace.
Got it. Okay, so kind of moving a little bit deeper into the implementation part as well.
Sure.
What are some of the, the pitfalls that researchers should be mindful of as they're getting all these different sources, collecting information, and then, of course, as you said, data visualization and so on as well for the presentation part of it?
Sure. I would say, so I'm going to give you like 3 or 4 off the top of my head, and we can share the slides in a little bit that will kind of go into
Okay.
greater detail on that. But
Yep.
I would say as a researcher, I would say just the number one challenge or pitfall that you should avoid is not getting your insights off of Insights Island. And Insights Island means that like there's so much to know. And as a researcher, you usually are craving information. You want to learn more about a topic or about a subject. And so you collect all of this stuff, right? It's in your head, it's on your hard drive. You're collecting and reading reports, you're reading articles and news and information, but it's not actually leaving your own island, right? The island, which is yourself. And so the most important thing in anything, I'd say, with dealing with insights, especially because insights are so crucial to an organization, to any organization, right? The number one reason why you need insights is so that you can make a decision. And so that decision is either strategically, what should the company do? What should they invest in? How should they address changing consumer perceptions or needs? Or if you're on the sales side of things, how can you better convince someone that they should buy you or buy your service or your product? And so the getting research or insights off of Insights Island is about really focusing on the communication aspect of your role. And there's 2 parts of communication, right? There's the communication about the things that are part of your roadmap, the things that you're trying to do and accomplish, but it's also getting insights into the hands of the people that are going to use that data and that information in their everyday lives. And that's really part of the one of the greatest challenges. It just takes a lot of thought in terms of how to make data interesting, how to make it relevant. A lot of people who are not in research, they're not numbers people. They don't care about the details to the extent that a market researcher or someone who works in insights does. They don't care about confidence intervals. They don't care about ANCOVA versus MANCOVA, versus t-test or probability, sample or things like that. And that's where a lot of researchers in particular can get hung up. But it's really important that you spend time to craft either stories that will make your data come to life, or you can craft mnemonic tools that makes it easier for your clients, your end client, to memorize or remember the things that you're talking about. And it takes a lot of thought. Thinking takes time. Mind takes time is an expression. But that's part of the role that, once you master that, then you start to see people will use those tools. They'll use your stories because it's relatable and they can just pass those on. And that's how you start to see the influence of the time and thought that went into your roadmap.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah. By the way, let me know when you want me to pull up your slides. I can do that
Sure.
right now if you'd like. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
And
so
when you
this is,
want me to move to the next one as well.
yeah. So again, this is like an insights roadmap is like any kind of map. It's a tool. It's a guide to get to you to where you're going. If you flip to the next, I'm a big fan of maps for the record. Love maps of all sorts, whether it's a map of the world, map of the United States, map of New Jersey, any type of map I'm a big fan of. But this tool, this slide basically, and it looks like it's running over, but that's fine. Basically, you have to know where you are. You have to know what that looks like. And so you have to define your starting point. And so there's a lot of components that go into that, right? What's working and what's not working? It's a very simple question to ask. You can do that in an email format. You don't need, SurveyMonkey or any advanced survey technology skills to understand exactly what's going on within your organization or within your particular team or within the stakeholders that you're serving. So that stakeholder needs and feedback is super important. There's overall satisfaction. I mentioned the word benchmarks here. So if you haven't done this before, it's very helpful to get a benchmark about what people think about your team's output or your individual output, so that you can report on that as an improvement or as future work to be done. What are the current problems or challenges that your organization is trying to solve? Are there any, again, I already mentioned this, major events or meetings? These are things that live already on the calendar. And so you have to work your way backwards from that deadline to having a solution in place, whether it's an analysis from a data perspective, or conducting primary research. You should also look at what are your current tools? What does the research or insights toolbox look like? Are there any tools that you're missing, or white space that would help you define the data or the information that you're trying to communicate more easily? What about partnerships? Are there different vendors that you're working with that are good at a particular area, but they're not good at others, and those are things that you want to improve on? If you're looking at it from a leadership perspective, what are your team's current skills? What are they good at? What are they not good at? Could they improve any aspects of their roles? Ad hoc requests, I list this here because it's incredibly important. A lot of research and insights teams have to deal with ad hoc requests, meaning just random questions that come up. And they are all tied to either, individual questions that people have or decisions that they're trying to make. It's an incredibly insightful part of the insights role is to understand the nature of those ad hoc requests. So how many are you getting? What type are they? Are they for detailed information? Are they asking for third party, just general industry type information? Are they looking for benchmarks? How often are they asking? So keeping track of those is an incredibly helpful tool for mapping out the journey or the strategic plan that you're trying to create, because those questions give you an insight into just either data that you have readily at hand or information that you need to get and figure out how to be able to answer those questions going forward. There's another component of ad hoc requests, which is about how quickly can you respond to some of these questions? Do you have the tools already in-house? Is it an easy answer because you already have it? Or is that an opportunity for you to not give someone a fish, but teach them how to fish? So in other words, you make your data available in a place where they can go find it so that they're not bugging you for something that's simple that they can find on their own. Cultural assessment is really about just understanding, like, what's the nature of your organization? Are they open to insights? Do they need things to be formally presented to them? Are they able to find things on their own? These are the types of things that help you to define your starting point and where you are. And then obviously, as you look to your destination, it's really important to know where you're going. When I was a kid, when I was growing up, my mom always loved to go out for a drive. She said, let's just go on a drive. So we load the whole family up into the car and we go on this drive. And the funny thing is, I never knew if we got there, like, where are we going? I don't know if we got there. I don't know when we should turn around. Did we see what we were supposed to see? I never knew, because we were just going for a drive without a destination in mind. So unless you have that destination in mind, you don't know if you get there. And in which case, again, any road will get you there, but that's not exactly what you're trying to do here. So on the destination side of things, you have to define what success looks like for you. And you will get that feedback directly from, again, your manager or from your individual stakeholders. They'll let you know what winning looks like, but you have to document that as well. SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. On the insights side of things, I've often heard people say, it's like, well, we don't know what our budget's going to go towards. We don't know how we're going to spend it. We don't ever know what types of questions or problems are going to come up. So how can we possibly have or set goals? There's a lot of different types of goals you can set. It could be the number of studies that you're doing against your target audience or competitively. It could be the number of improvements you're trying to make as an organization, either from a technology standpoint or from an innovation standpoint. It could be the number of communications that you've had to the organization, whether it's on a quarterly basis or in terms of an annual review process. These are all things that you can set as goals that are specific. They fit the SMART goal criteria. And it's just important to think about it that way. In terms of also like ad hoc requests, that's also something that you can improve on. Like the number, are they decreasing over time because people are finding the answers on their own? Are you upskilling team members? Are people getting smarter about the technology that's out there? Are they starting to use AI in ways that they haven't used before? Sometimes it takes a challenge. Sometimes it takes a push. Sometimes it takes just setting that as a goal to make people or force people to try to adapt new processes or adopt new processes. And so I mentioned in the defining where you are, you have to take a benchmark of where you are, but you also want to get a measure of whether things have improved or not. So getting additional feedback at a later point in time with your org is going to be super helpful. That's going to help define your roadmap and for things that you need to work and improve on going forward. I already talked about, your individual vendors or your research or insights toolbox. Have you added new partners? Have you added new tools that makes your job easier? Automation is a huge thing. If you're not taking advantage of automation in some capacity or another, then you're going to fall behind, or AI for that matter. And so I can keep going through the list, but basically, the important thing about your destination is that you have to know what it is in advance so that, when you get there, you can celebrate. Otherwise, years will blend together. Time just, unlike the grade school system, when you graduate from one year and you go to the next year, you start a new year and you can tell it's a new beginning. You have this wonderful time off in between. In the business world, there is no time off. There's a week maybe, or maybe 3 days at the end of the year, but the calendar year changes, but everything else blurs together. But you have to know what your individual year and what the goals that you set out within that time frame are. And very often, since I'm mentioning time, I show this visual of you are here and the destination you're getting to. Those go right through the middle of a calendar on purpose because everything has to map back to the calendar. If you're not mapping it to a specific time period, then the chances are it's not going to get done. And if there's no urgency to getting it done, it's just going to become one of those things that gets pushed aside.
Yeah, I actually have there are two questions that have come up that are very relevant to this slide. So I'm going to pull them up. So here's one, and then the second one has to do with success. So here's the first question. Is the roadmap more visual, like a map, or written?
So it's a great question. So a map so the ways that I've constructed my maps have been as a strategic plan. And what that means is that it hasn't been on the calendar per se, as in like, these are, I've mapped it as basically just a document that has what are the strategic goals that I'm trying to accomplish, and then what are the individual tactics aligned with each goal. And everything that you decide as a tactic, and there's, oh, I just lost the screen. Wait, give me 1 second. I'm getting a call.
Oh, no problem.
Let me come back. All right. So everything that you do, and every person that sits within your team, whatever it is that they're working on, should map back to that strategic plan, to your insights roadmap. And everyone who's part of a team should be able to see their role and what they're contributing within that strategic plan. So while you could map it to a calendar, I typically have mapped it to just broad strategic initiatives, choosing to list out all of my tactics underneath each one. And that tactic could be an analysis. It could be a custom research study. It could be presentations to internal org people. And then it usually, and so the actual accomplishment of that should map to a calendar. That doesn't have to live on the actual roadmap that you share. If that
Got it.
answers the question.
Okay. Okay, I have one more here,
Sure.
which is if you have multiple, you can read it too,
Sure.
right?
The
Okay, just
question
making
is,
sure you can see it. If you have
yeah.
multiple different insights on what success looks like from different stakeholders, how do you decide which metrics to use?
So I think that your strategic plan, your insights roadmap has to account for different standards of success. And depending on how widely varied they are, they should be able to coexist. They might just be greater or lesser degrees of the same type of success metric. So if you have specific KPIs that you're talking about, please share. That'd be super helpful. But I would say when you, from my experience, the level of, so what success would look like to my manager is making sure that all my stakeholders are happy, right? Getting them the information that they need to do the job. So that's very different from what the individual stakeholder needs, in which case I need generational insights on what our youngest consumers are doing, and I need proof that advertising is working in a particular situation. So that could be, those might be individual studies that need to be done to get there. I think what's really important to mention here, though, is that everyone's definition of success is not equal, or your stakeholders are not all equal, right? So your boss's feedback, ultimately important. Your biggest clients, your biggest stakeholders, the people that talk to your boss, if you're in a large organization, you might be playing the role of middle manager, that also becomes important. As you get further down in the org, you might get feedback from an individual salesperson, and that does not mean just because they mentioned it to you as what their needs are, that should be something that should be part of your strategic plan or part of your insights roadmap. It's important to weigh your biggest clients first, and what their needs are, and then also to be able to quantify the types of requests that you're getting. And if you start to get multiple, this is why I mentioned ad hoc requests are super important, and they're insightful, because if somebody's asking a question, it's probably a question that the larger team might find helpful to have an answer for, which then becomes something that's important to communicate. But you also have to be able to, so I'll say this: the purpose of having a strategic plan or an insights roadmap is to know whether a destination or not is part of that plan. That's how you know whether you have a good plan or not, or whether you're living by that plan. As an example, I used to go to conferences all the time, and there's conferences in every industry, and you will go there, and you will be just inundated by all the different booths and all the different things that people are selling. Before I had a strategic plan, before I had an insights roadmap, I would go to these things and I would just walk around, kind of just like in circles, just not really sure. I'd be listening to everyone's presentation. The second that I had a destination in mind, where I was trying to get to, that clarified everything. Because then I could walk into this conference room, I could walk into the conference floor with 1,000 different booths, and I could actually very clearly see, be like, I don't need you, like, you're not for me. This is very interesting. This is going to serve my, strategic imperative number 3. Tell me more about your business. And that's how you are. It basically, it it gives you the power to say yes or no very decisively. It lets you know, it empowers you to know whether you're making the right move or not, or whether a solution fits your plan or not and what you're trying to get to, if that helps.
Okay. So, is there a next slide, or do you want to?
Yeah, you can go to the
Okay.
next one. That'd be great. So
Okay.
these are insights roadmaps that I've developed in real time, in real life. And so one of the things that's important is, like, you might have to create your own tools. And I have this listed as a tip, but you have to create, the version of your roadmap that works for you. If it lives on a timeline, going back to the earlier question, then that's fine. Or if you just want to list it off as as a pillar or as a strategic imperative, whatever it is, that's your starting point. So I mentioned you are here in the very upper line. This is a look at one of my earlier insights roadmaps. And basically, you'll see also my mission, right? Focus all team members on effective storytelling tied to the three pillars of ad sales research. My entire background, most of my career has been focused on ad sales research, which means, you have to know how your individual content is performing relative to your audience. There's a tremendous amount of expertise that goes into your audience, right? What are their trends, preferences for your particular brand or for your competitive set? What are their trends and preferences or related to individual ad categories? And then can you prove the actual effectiveness of whatever campaign that they ran within your media to demonstrate that it worked, guaranteeing that that client will actually renew, but also giving you the ability to create case studies that will further help you in whatever your role is. So that's a great starting point. I just want to mention what's really important to know here, and this is in my earlier days of my career, it's a work in progress, right? You have to start somewhere, but unless you actually start to document what those things are in terms of where you are and where you're trying to get to, unless you start someplace, you're never going to have the ability to actually tell that story at the end of the year. And I'll just skip to that part right now, right? So the strategic plan or your insights roadmap and how it looks like at the beginning of the year then becomes your victory tour. You have to communicate this back to your organization. You have to share this feedback with your stakeholders. This is what we set out to do. Once you've actually defined, or you've had a work in progress for a certain amount of time, once you've defined what those things are, what are the individual tactics, conduct this number of research studies, gain this amount of insights about our audience, or it could be a segmentation, it could be preferences for within different topics or things like that. It could be a data analysis on first party information that you have that you just haven't had time to process. Once it makes it to your map, it's very important to know that at the end of the year, because you define this, because hopefully you've communicated this to your stakeholders, that it's important and that they all get buy-in. Every stakeholder that you present it to, individually or as a group, they can nod their head and they say, I see what I've asked for in this document. Then you can turn that around at the end of the year if you've been militant and diligent about accomplishing your goals. Then you can get a checkbox for everything that you've set out to do. And then you basically take all the tactics that you had in your strategic plan, and you can turn them into a victory or accomplishment statement at the end of the year. And that's ultimately, that's beginning with the end in mind. That's knowing exactly what you're setting out to do and then going out and doing it. And if you don't get it done, because there's a lot of things that might come up along the way, that's fine. But you at least had a starting point. You at least had a goal in mind, and you are starting to get those things done.
Yeah, I think this is really helpful in terms of how you can organize all the different aspects that you talked about as well. So this is super helpful. Should I go to the next slide?
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing on here before you flip.
Yeah.
I have this middle box, which is capturing feedback and then reporting that back to the org. If you're going to capture feedback, it could be from your individual team, or it could come from individual stakeholders. A very simple answer is what's working, what's not working. That can be, you can do a SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. However you want to do it, I would say just keep it basic, but collect the feedback What I found incredibly helpful was talking to my team and knowing what they thought worked, and knowing what they thought was a weakness. Because very often, if they think that, then the organization is also going to think that. So if that becomes an immediate thing to be fixed, or something immediately to add, to the strategic plan that we're trying to get accomplished that year.
Great. I
Ooh,
have, go ahead.
last
Sorry.
point.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about and mapping out different tactics to your strategic plan, there's very often you'll get a lot of different ideas. You'll come across articles, reports, people mentioning things, conversations and meetings, things like that. It's very important to have a place to try to capture some of your ideas for the things that you want to work on. It might not fit your plan for this immediate year, but if you have it kept in some place where you can actually go back and refer to it. In the earlier days, I've done Post-it notes, and I've had Post-it notes scattered all over the place. I've done notebooks, but the problem with a notebook is things get lost in the pages, right? It's once you close the book, you don't see it. It's not relevant. So I found Notion as a tool incredibly helpful, incredibly easy to use, but it's a great place to just dump ideas and organize them in one way or another.
Yeah, I use Notion too, and I love it. This is not an ad for Notion, folks.
Yeah.
We're just talking about how we use it and love it. Yeah, great point. You're right. Having this one place to go to where you have all your information stored is really important, both like roadmaps, accomplishments, and things you want to compare, your current to in terms of the past.
Yeah.
One comment here and another question relevant to this discussion. First this is pertaining to the previous question that you answered, which is you answered my question about who your biggest client is, and the convention example. And then I have a question with how often do you revisit the roadmap throughout the year, and do you ever revise it?
100%. So the roadmap, so if you're just starting out, the roadmap can be a work in process for a long time. You can go deep into the year while you're still developing it, because you're collecting this feedback for the first time of truly understanding where you are and where you're trying to get to. But once you've done it for that first year and you've gotten to the end of year, report back on the things that you've accomplished, your next year, that roadmap is just further refining the things that were already on your plan. It gets easier and easier every single year, because you're building on the knowledge that you've accumulated, not only knowledge in terms of your audience or your consumer, but also just in terms of your organization, what their needs are, and how things are changing. It's a work in progress in the beginning, and it'll change throughout the year. Sometimes, you might document that you wanted to have 8 different org communications, or you thought you were going to set out to create 5 different newsletters for various topics or things like that. And it might only become 3. But the point is, once you start and once you have these things documented, then you will tend to revise less and less as you go. That being said, at any different point throughout the year, something might come up that's urgent. You might have to do research that was not part of that roadmap. And you have to accommodate that. And so it's just very important to stay flexible. I list this as a pitfall. If you're not, as a roadblock or a traffic jam, you have to use your roadmap as a tool. But no, look, there's multiple ways to arrive at your destination. There's no one road that will take you there. There's multiple. And sometimes if you're not flexible, you don't want to pursue a destination in one route just because that's what you set out in the beginning of the year. It's not a failure to course correct or to change routes because things have come up. So yeah, it's definitely a work in progress.
Okay, sounds good. And then I guess on that note, did you want to talk through this slide as well? And then we have one more question as well.
Sure. So I use the roadmap very literally from a roadmap perspective, hence traffic jams and road closures. But it's basically pitfalls to avoid. I'd say number one, and this is not a particular list, but number one, you have to communicate. Once you've started to go about the task of creating what your insights roadmap is, you have to share that roadmap with your stakeholders so that you get buy-in and so that they see exactly what you're going. The ultimate goal is transparency, right? I think you want to be transparent about what you're trying to do and accomplish, and what winning looks like. You want to avoid over promising and under delivering. So I have direct experience with this. It's like we want to understand, we want to be able to do 6 category studies this year. And by category, I'm referring to an industry category. So what are the consumer, key drivers of consumer behavior within tech and telecom, within financial services, within retail, quick service restaurants, you name it. And that's a lot to get done in a single year. And so you want to be realistic, and you just have to make sure that you do the opposite of overpromising and under-delivering. You want to under-promise and over-deliver. And you just want to just realize that research and insights take time. Everyone talks about insights as if they're like really easy to come by, but they're not. They take a lot of work. They take a lot of brain power it's not recognized on a slide. It's not recognized in a single presentation. It's something that you just have to budget into your overall calendar. I already talked about getting research insights off of Research Island or Insights Island. It's very important you share and communicate, which is further building on the point one. You have to communicate the insights you've learned along the way, because that's what people are going to use. Upskilling is incredibly important, right? There's this world is very dynamic. Things are changing all the time. You have to get better at using new tools, trying different things out, which is part of the innovation. It's part of just innovation in general. You have to innovate, or else you can get stale very quickly, or you'll find yourself, challenged based on the other skills that other people are learning very quickly. Documenting your journey is just starting someplace. You have to start someplace with, again, where you are. I've talked about this enough. But you also have to share your accomplishments. You have to share your victories. And it's not about bragging. It's just really about communicating to the organization all the things that you've done, that you've worked on. And it doesn't have to be from a leadership perspective. It could be from an individual contributor standpoint. If you took on a project, you had to learn different insights. If you had to learn how to use different AI tools because you experimented with them to help you out, it's important to share that, because then, again, it's about being transparent in what you've learned and developed. I definitely want to say you want to avoid not celebrating your victories or your major accomplishments, right? The end of the year will come, and unless you share all the different work that you've done, all the different insights you've gathered, the different analyses, the different types of data that you've processed, it could be thousands of rows in an Excel spreadsheet, or it could be number of slides that you've created. Either way, you want to create some metric that shares with your immediate stakeholders the work and the passion and the love that you have for the work that you're doing, so that you can get a sense of it. And then that also creates a benchmark for you for the following year for the type of work you want to report on. Failure to build long-term connected data solutions. This is an interesting thing. I didn't really talk about this, but your data, you can do a one-off study and it lives as a one-off. You can do 30 one-off studies, and then you have, at the end of the year, you have 30 studies that don't talk to each other, that haven't built on each other in a meaningful way. And I think going forward, it's really important to have connected insights, connected data, ways that you can plug that data into something larger, so that you can use that data, whether it's from primary research or from any analysis, you can use that to get better, more efficient, faster at what you're doing. I talk about failure to consider multiple routes. There's different ways to get there. It might be $100,000 study, or it could be, $10,000 studies. There's a lot of different ways that you can arrive at the same place. You have to be flexible with your travel plans. Also worth noting, taking scenic detours, right? So basically, again, I'm just going deep into the analogy here of what a roadmap is as it applies to the roads. But a scenic detour with insights could be part of your innovation strategy, if you think about it that way. It's like there's a lot of different ways or tools. Sometimes you have to experiment with them. Sometimes it requires budget. Sometimes it requires time or resources. It's worth it if your team either grows closer together, they get better at what they're doing, or they see from their experience ways that they can apply something that might not be related to what the immediate company's focus is on, but they can correlate that in a meaningful way. I'll stop there.
Got it. Thank you. No, that the details were amazing because, a lot of the times we don't get into the details, and I think that's where some of the real sort of rewards are in just understanding, what you should be doing and what you should be watching out for. We have a couple more
where
questions.
the rubber hits the road, Sonia.
Absolutely. To use another road analogy.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we have a couple more questions that I wanted to bring up. This one is, what AI skills do you see that will be in demand in the future or right now? And if you're allowed to share, how does Disney and NBCUniversal use AI right now?
Sure. So I can't speak to Disney or NBCUniversal and what they're using AI for right now. It's been a while since I've been in either organization. But in terms of AI skills that will be in demand, I think AI is really, I mean, if you're not exposed to it already, it is branching out into every single aspect of every job function I think that there is. So from an insights perspective, it's arriving at reportable answers or solutions faster, or it could be on the data visualization side, or it's being able to get insights from data that, it's from a processing speed, from an efficiency standpoint, it's getting those insights into the hands of people faster in a way that was never available before. In terms of creating presentations, it's creating presentations again faster, and getting those insights out into the hands of the people that need that more than ever. One thing I haven't talked about is just like the importance of speed. I think speed to insight is so important. If you consider the fact that insights, whether again it's data analysis or primary research, survey research, insights are good for making decisions, right? So if you are conducting research or conducting insights for the sake of informing a decision, the longer you take into getting those insights into the hands of the people that want it, it just increases the pressure on you to have perfection. And I don't think in this world going forward, perfection is not required, right? You can spend hours upon hours on PowerPoint slides, moving boxes around, aligning different bullet points, getting the right imagery, things like that. But if you get a question today and you're able to turn around a response by tomorrow, or by Monday of next week, and it's not perfect, you will be forgiven for the fact that it's not perfect if you're answering the questions that people are looking for. So I think AI is essential for that point alone, is that it empowers, it gives you skills that you never had before. I'm not the biggest Excel person. I've never worked in Python. I've never worked in SQL. But when I've used certain AI tools, I'm suddenly given insights into how these tools are used, or I'm actually given the code that I can then plug into, these different tools to get at the answers that I need. That is incredible. Oh, I lost your volume. I can't hear you.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah. So we have time for just one more question. I'm going to bring it up on the screen right now, this is from earlier in your presentation. How do you plan which feedback or insight to validate first, or do you validate and invalidate everything first and then push everything to prioritization next?
Okay, so I'm going to read it again. So how do you plan which feedback or insight to validate first, or do you validate and validate everything first, then push everything to prioritization next? What are your favorite tools in road mapping, and thoughts on Jira versus Trello? So I would say, if everything is a priority, then you don't have any priorities, right? So it's important to take your most important stakeholder feedback or needs or deadlines first. Those are going to be the most important. Everything else, in terms of if we're talking about, I would say if you validate everything, you're going to run out of time very quickly. So this comes down to the big rocks discussion, right? Your big rocks in a jar analogy. I'm not going to explain it. I'm just going to assume that everyone knows that analogy, that if you start with your small rocks first, you're not going to have room for the big rocks. So your big rocks are your biggest clients and their biggest needs and biggest priorities. And then everything else should come second. And you'll find that is going to be your deciding factor. In terms of road mapping, I haven't used Jira. I have used Trello. Trello is incredibly easy. And I use that for onboarding at one of my prior roles. Miro boards are also really easy to use because you can just kind of dump things in there. But again, Notion, and again, we're not paid sponsors of Notion, but I find Notion to be just the most intuitive and easiest because I can use simple cut and paste functions. I can create or transfer things from bullets into checkboxes. I can create multiple pages that adds imagery or pictures, web links, articles, things like that. I can do it in a way that is just very easy for me to work with, and that I find very important. So the user interface has got to be easy. I have to be able to do it not only from my desktop but also from my phone, and I can do that all from Notion. It's been helpful.
Great, awesome. Well, we're 1 minute away from ending this at 7 p.m. as we promised everyone. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Marc, for being here and for all your insights about insights.
Yes.
It's been remarkable. I'm going to, for everyone on this call, I'm going to summarize some of that information, put it out in the newsletter as well. So thank you so much again.
Are you
This
using
was
AI for that?
awesome. I am not using AI for that because it's your authentic voice that I want to summarize. So without AI, but yeah, thanks again, and everyone, just make sure that you subscribe to YouTube in order to get more updates on such episodes. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sonia. It's been awesome. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. All right. Bye-bye.